Hello everyone, it's Bastille Day today, July 14th, 2023, the anniversary of the spark of the French Revolution in 1789 and the storming of the Bastille. And so it's fitting that today, which happens to be the 50th anniversary of my own entry into revolutionary politics, it's fitting that we reflect on this day and a memory of mine that I hope inspires you and elevates you in these trying times. It's called A Revolutionary Remembrance. My first protest 50 years ago today by yours truly, Kevin Annett, Eagle Strong Voice. It happened on Bastille Day, naturally. I was 17 and a raw recruit to radical politics, having sampled a bit of it at the local socialist hangout known as Vanguard Books in Vancouver. The flaming red poster on its window announced a big protest rally that same day against the latest US nuclear testing that was radiating our west coast. I was off to that protest like a bullet. The sound of the multitudes reached me before their numbers came into view. A wonderful sea of humanity stretching from the old Vancouver courthouse down Georgia Street as far as I could see. Thousands of voices exclaimed a common outrage as they swept me into their ranks. The downtown core shook with a new sound that drowned out banality and business as usual. "We can stop them," said that single voice. "We are many, and they are few." You know, in that instant, a joy I had never known before and that would last me a lifetime suddenly gripped me and raised me above myself to a new purpose. Here is where I belonged, in the struggle to change the world. To live only for myself seemed suddenly absurd and selfish. With surging delight, I worked my way through the crowd as friendly hands thrust leaflets at me and friendlier faces beamed and shared a common bliss. I was drawn to the heart of the protest on the courthouse steps, where speakers ranted and longhairs like me draped banners in themselves over the stayed stones. And that's when I spotted the Army cadets across the street. They were kids my age and even younger, and they formed what they called an honor guard for the Lieutenant Governor, who was scheduled to appear at the Hotel Vancouver right next to our rally. The guy's name was John Nicholson, and he had as much chance of getting past us into that posh hotel as a pig has to fly. Some of our people were grouped around the cadets, talking to them and pinning what turned out to be Greenpeace buttons onto their uniforms. Then an old man broke through the crowd and yelled at the kids, "You guys should all desert! That asshole Nicholson is a big wheel in Brascan, that Canadian company that overthrew the Brazilian government in 1964 and had brought in the fucking military." We all cheered our support as the cadets looked vaguely embarrassed, and I handed leaflets to them, and they read them carefully. The old guy came up to me and said, "Reminds me of the Peg back in 1919. "Winnipeg," I replied. "Fucking A," he smiled, showing gaps. "We had the soldiers cornered in their barracks, and we told them to desert, and some of them did. They knew they were being used to bust our strike, and they didn't like it, so we put it to them." "You mean the Winnipeg General Strike?" I said. "You were there?" "Wasn't any older than you are now," he said. "Made me a goddamn radical for life, it did." A burly cop appeared in the besieged doorway of the hotel just then, and he stared with horror at our motley crowd as he said something into his walkie-talkie. My old buddy spotted him and spat out, "Fucking scabs in uniform, they never change." "Well, they can't do much harm to us right now," I replied, gesturing to our huge crowd. The guy slapped me on my arm with a laugh and a look that took decades off his face. "That's it, boys. Workers of the world unite, and we got the bastards by the balls." Well, somehow our colossus began to move towards the American consulate as our banners and bullhorns led the way, and some guys shimming up lampposts with their placards. My old buddy vanished into the crowd, waving his arms and shouting, but something of him always remained with me. I couldn't get anywhere near to the consulate, but it didn't matter. There were plenty of other juicy targets along the way. A bunch of protesters burst into the Royal Bank and started leafleting the tellers, while a younger version of my buddy yelled at them with a bullhorn, "Royal Bank, blood money from Brazil! Occupy, nationalize, throw out the corporate bums." Across Burrard Street was the Anglican church that 3 decades later I would help occupy, along with native survivors of Christian genocide, a slaughter of the innocents that was happening just a few miles away from where we marched on the North Shore, in the Squamish so-called residential schools. On those church steps, a woman was yelling something at us with a twisted look of hatred. It's a curious fact that even the most militant Canadians will stop for red lights during demonstrations, and our crowd was no exception. The riot police who lingered on the margins of our action used the break in our ranks to rush in and start arresting people. But once our people combined again, Vancouver's less than finest found themselves surrounded. Their thuggery dissolved in an instant in the face of our power. Apparently some top cop read the riot act to our people at the consulate, but nobody was worried. We knew that as long as we stuck together, nothing could touch us. And that lesson was not forgotten by me and by many of us on that radiant day. We'd be back again in even greater numbers over the years that followed. Indeed, we returned only 2 months later to the U.S. consulate, after 30,000 people like us in Chile had been butchered by a U.S.-sponsored military coup. That tragedy taught me that we cannot make our revolutions only halfway, any more than you can skin a tiger claw by claw. We always learn the best lessons the hard way, but we do so together or not at all. What passes for protest these days is like watching compliant psych ward patients line up for their medication. The irreverent outrage, the imagination, and the courage of my generation is nowhere to be seen. But our spirit persists nevertheless. I felt it the other day as I stood where our voices once filled the sky and I was baptized into my purpose. Take away our hands and our feet and even our lives, and that spirit will endure, as does the soul of every defeated revolutionary that finds its way into our hearts so that the vision can continue and take root again among us. I recently ran into one of my few remaining comrades from those early days. He gave me a happy smile when I reminded him of the mega protest on July 14th, 1973, where we first met and took our step together into the revolutionary movement. Larry's aged eyes sparkled as we recalled that wondrous devotion and how it never left us, and he began to cry. He took my arm and said, "It never mattered if we won or lost, did it, Kev? What matters is that we tried and that we never gave up." During the American Civil War, our brother Walt Whitman put it this way: "Courage yet, my brother, my sister, keep on. Liberty is to be served whatever occurs, for nothing is quelled by failure or the indifference of the people, or by the show of power, soldiers, cannon, penal statutes. What we believe in waits forever through all the continents. What we believe in invites no one, promises nothing, sits in calmness and light, knows no discouragement, waiting patiently, waiting its time. Not songs of loyalty alone are these, but songs of insurrection. For I am the sworn poet of every dauntless rebel the world over, and he going with me leaves peace and routine behind him, and stakes his life to be lost at every moment. Then courage yet, revolter, revoltress, for till all else ceases, you must not cease. For when liberty goes out of a place, it is always the last to go. When there are no more memories of heroes and martyrs, and when all life and the souls of men and women are discharged from any part of the earth, only then shall liberty be discharged too, and the tyrant enter into full possession. So carry on and revolt again. Walk unheld, free the whole earth over, till we make our ineffaceable mark upon time and peoples, and saturate all eras, that the men and women of races, ages to come, may prove brethren and lovers as we are." And this is Kevin Annett, age 17, right there, with my fellow revolutionaries. Same year that protest happened. And so from both of us, we say, carry it on, friends. Carry on the revolution, within and without. This is Kevin Annett, Eagle Strong Voice, murderbydecree.com, republicofcanada.org. Stay tuned very soon for more.